Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Tonight I invite you to relax, leave behind the stress of the day, and enjoy a peaceful bedtime story that will gently help you unwind and drift off to sleep. Before we begin, if you enjoy relaxing stories like this, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new bedtime story. Now dim the lights, get comfortable, close your eyes if you'd like, take a slow, deep breath, and let the gentle sound of the sea guide you into tonight's story. The Lighthouse That Waited.
It was the autumn of 1978 on the peaceful coast of Maine, USA. The days had become shorter, and every evening the cool ocean breeze carried the scent of pine trees and salty water. Small fishing boats gently rocked in the harbor while the old lighthouse stood quietly on a rocky cliff, watching over the sea as it had done for generations. 26-year-old Daniel Brooks had recently moved to the tiny seaside village of Harbor Point. After years of living in the busy streets of Boston, he wanted a slower life, one where mornings began with the sound of seagulls instead of traffic, and evenings ended with the calming rhythm of the waves. Daniel rented a small wooden cottage overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. It wasn't fancy. The roof creaked when the wind blew, and the fireplace crackled softly every night. But somehow the little house already felt like home. Every evening after making a warm cup of chamomile tea, Daniel would sit on the porch wrapped in a thick wool blanket. He watched the sun slowly disappear behind the endless sea as the lighthouse beam quietly swept across the darkening horizon. There was something peaceful about that light. It moved slowly, back and forth, again and again, almost like it was gently telling every sailor, "You're safe! Keep going!" One chilly evening, an elderly neighbor named Mr. Thomas stopped by carrying a basket of fresh apples. "Beautiful night," he smiled. Daniel nodded. "It's so quiet here." Mr. Thomas looked toward the lighthouse. "It has been keeping people company for almost 100 years, he said softly. "Some people say it even keeps lonely hearts company." Daniel smiled politely, unsure whether the old man was joking. After Mr. Thomas left, Daniel stayed outside a little longer. The stars slowly filled the sky. The ocean whispered against the rocks below. A gentle wind rustled through the pine trees. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called into the night. Everything felt calm, safe, almost timeless. When Daniel finally went inside, he placed another log into the fireplace. The warm orange flames danced across the wooden walls, making the cottage feel cozy and peaceful. He opened an old notebook and began writing about his first week in Harbor Point. "Maybe," he wrote, "peace isn't something you find. Maybe it's something you finally slow down enough to notice." Outside, the lighthouse continued its silent watch over the sleeping sea, and without realizing it, Daniel smiled, closed his notebook, and listened to the comforting sound of the waves until his eyes slowly grew heavy. The night became quieter. The wind became softer. And somewhere beyond the dark ocean, tomorrow was patiently waiting. The next morning arrived quietly. A soft golden sunrise spread across the ocean, painting the water with warm shades of orange and pink. Daniel woke to the peaceful sound of seagulls gliding through the cool morning air. He opened the window, letting the fresh sea breeze fill his little cottage. The day moved slowly, just as life did in Harbor Point. After breakfast, Daniel walked along the rocky shoreline. Tiny seashells sparkled in the sunlight while gentle waves rolled onto the beach, one after another, never rushing. Near the lighthouse, he found an old wooden bench facing the sea. He sat there for a long time. There was no hurry, no noise, only the endless rhythm of the ocean. A kind old woman named Margaret passed by carrying a basket of freshly baked bread. "You must be the new neighbor," she said with a warm smile. Daniel nodded. "I've never lived somewhere this peaceful." Margaret smiled gently. "That's the sea," she whispered. "It teaches us that everything has its own time." Her words stayed with Daniel for the rest of the day. As evening arrived, the fishing boats slowly returned to the harbor. Their small lanterns reflected softly across the calm water, like tiny golden stars. Daniel walked back to his cottage just as the lighthouse lit up for another night. Its bright beam moved slowly across the ocean. Left, right, left again, steady and calm. After dinner, he made another cup of warm tea and wrapped himself in his favorite blanket. Outside, the wind whispered through the pine trees. Inside, the fireplace glowed with a quiet orange light. Daniel picked up the notebook again. He wrote, "Today I learned that silence isn't empty. It's filled with the sound of waves, the wind in the trees, and little moments that remind us to slow down." He placed the notebook on the small wooden table. The fire crackled softly. The clock on the wall ticked slowly. Far away, the lighthouse continued its patient watch over the sleeping sea. Daniel closed his eyes for just a moment. He listened. To the waves, to the wind, to the peaceful night. Before long, sleep came gently, as if the ocean itself had quietly carried his dreams across the calm, moonlit water. And outside, beneath thousands of shining stars, Harbor Point rested peacefully until another beautiful morning would arrive. A few days passed, and Daniel began to feel that Harbor Point had always been his home. Each morning started with the gentle cries of seagulls and the fresh scent of the sea. Every evening ended with the comforting glow of the old lighthouse. One afternoon, after finishing a small painting of the coastline, Daniel decided to take a slow walk along the beach. The sand was cool beneath his feet. Tiny waves rolled onto the shore with a soft, peaceful rhythm. Wash, pause, wash, pause. The sound was so gentle that it seemed to quiet every busy thought in his mind. As the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon, the sky turned shades of gold, pink, and deep blue. Daniel found the same old wooden bench near the lighthouse and sat quietly. There was no one else around, only the whispering wind, the endless ocean, and the steady beam of the lighthouse sweeping across the dark sea. A family of ducks floated peacefully across a small pond nearby, while distant fishing boats drifted slowly toward the harbor. Everything moved gently. Nothing hurried. Nothing demanded attention. When darkness settled over the village, the stars began to appear one by one. Daniel looked up. He had never seen so many stars before. They filled the sky like tiny lanterns, shining softly above the quiet ocean. He smiled to himself and whispered, "Tonight feels like the whole world is resting." Later, back at his cottage, Daniel lit a small candle beside the fireplace. The warm glow filled the room with a peaceful light. He wrapped himself in his favorite blanket, opened his notebook, and wrote, "The sea reminds me that every wave reaches the shore in its own time. There is no need to rush through life." He gently closed the notebook. Outside, the lighthouse continued its slow and faithful watch. The waves kept their quiet rhythm. The wind sang softly through the pine trees. The stars watched over the sleeping village. Daniel listened to the peaceful sounds for a few moments longer. His breathing became slower. His eyes grew heavier, and before he knew it, he drifted into a deep, gentle sleep, while the lighthouse stood quietly beneath the endless night sky, waiting patiently for another beautiful sunrise. One quiet afternoon, soft gray clouds gathered above Harbor Point. The air became cool, and a gentle rain began to fall. It wasn't a heavy storm. It was the kind of rain that made the world feel peaceful. Raindrops tapped softly against Daniel's cottage windows. Tap, tap, tap. The sound blended with the distant waves, creating a calm melody that filled every corner of the little house. Daniel placed a kettle on the stove and brewed a warm cup of chamomile tea. He sat beside the fireplace with a thick blanket over his shoulders and watched the rain slide slowly down the glass. Outside, the lighthouse stood proudly in the mist. Its warm light gently swept across the rainy sea. Back and forth, slowly, steadily. As evening settled in, the rain became even softer. The village streets grew quiet. Fishing boats rested safely in the harbor. Not a single voice disturbed the peaceful night. Daniel opened his notebook and wrote only one sentence. "Even rainy days can bring the deepest peace." He smiled, closed the notebook, and simply listened. The rain, the fire, the wind, the waves, every sound seemed to slow the world down. As the fire crackled gently, Daniel leaned back in his chair. His breathing became slow and steady. The warmth of the room wrapped around him like a comforting hug. Outside, the rain continued its gentle song, while the lighthouse faithfully watched over the calm ocean. Little by little, minute by minute, the night grew quieter, the rain grew lighter, and Daniel slowly closed his eyes, letting the peaceful rhythm of the rain and the sea carry him into a deep, restful sleep. Far beyond the cottage, the old lighthouse continued to shine through the mist, quietly waiting for the first light of another beautiful morning. Winter arrived quietly in Harbor Point. One morning, Daniel opened his cottage door and found the village covered in a soft blanket of snow. The ocean was calm, the wind was gentle. Even the old lighthouse seemed to shine a little brighter against the pale winter sky. That evening, Daniel took one last slow walk to the lighthouse. The path was peaceful, with fresh snow crunching softly beneath his boots. When he reached the cliff, he stood quietly and looked out across the endless Atlantic Ocean. The waves rolled in, with the same gentle rhythm they always had. The lighthouse beam swept slowly across the dark sea. Back and forth, again and again. Daniel closed his eyes and took a deep, peaceful breath. He realized something important. He had come to Harbor Point looking for a new place to live. Instead, he had found something much more valuable. A quiet heart, a slower life, and the simple joy of peaceful moments. When he returned to his cottage, he lit the fireplace one final time. The warm flames danced gently across the room. He opened his notebook and wrote his last entry. The lighthouse never spoke a single word, yet it taught me the greatest lesson of all. Peace is always there, waiting quietly for those who choose to slow down and listen. Daniel gently closed the notebook and placed it on the wooden shelf beside the window. Outside, snowflakes drifted softly through the night. The stars sparkled above the silent sea. The lighthouse continued its faithful watch just as it always had. Inside the cozy cottage, the fire crackled softly. The room was warm, the night was calm. Daniel settled into his favorite chair, wrapped himself in his old blanket, and listened one last time to the gentle sound of the waves. His breathing became slow. His thoughts became quiet. And with a peaceful smile, he drifted into a deep, restful sleep. Outside, the lighthouse kept shining through the night, reminding every traveler that no matter how long the journey, there is always a light waiting to guide them home.